All right, ladies and gentlemen on the recording, we're going to go ahead and start with lecture one in this History of Tomorrow lecture series, now beginning in what is the middle of August 2024. Just thought I would say that because it's particularly relevant in the sense that I decided to offer this series in fairly quick succession after the History of Now series that was a little bit more widely attended and seemed to generate more interest. And because the book got finished, The History of Tomorrow, which is the sequel, and the American election season is really about to kick into high gear. And so a big part of the thesis of the History of Tomorrow, or the thesis to begin with of the History of Tomorrow, is that we are on the cusp of a transition, or the end. We're in a transition as we speak between two cultural incarnations, which have been fundamental. One of which has been a fundamental incarnation of American culture. I refer to it as Americanistic culture. And the one that remains to come. And so the History of Tomorrow, of course, as the title of the book suggests, is a predictive construct or historical narrative that intends to show you what this new America is going to be, which I refer to as post-Americanistic culture. And those of you that have already read into chapter one and when you register for the course, whether it's via recordings or whatever, you'll either have the first 5 chapters of the book, or you'll have the book in its entirety if you're doing it by recording some later juncture. You will see, right, that basically there are some very substantially important predictions there, and there's right away once you're in chapter 1, you see, oh, we have this anchor fact, which we're going to discuss next time, which I could come up with anything other than that, and I think it works anyway. I call it the wobble, right? And so we find ourselves now in the wobble, and in my view, and what I mean by that is a very acute instability in the American social contract. And that acute instability is, symbolized by the Obama presidency being succeeded very surprisingly, it certainly was to me, by the presidency of Donald Trump. It was easy to predict that Obama would be elected. It was easy to predict that Obama would be reelected. Those were easy. But then after that, weird things happened. And when I was talking to my students at the time, I said, yeah, Hillary Clinton's going to win. I mean, and of course, everybody was predicting that. So it was indeed a shocker when Donald Trump was elected. And it even led to the Democrats, proliferating conspiracy theories. Because, of course, when history doesn't go the way you think it should, or you're convinced that it should, then it's hard to face up to what is the meaning of that? Why is it going that way? And so, of course, the Democrats have no clue about the meaning of history any more than the Republicans or anybody else. And so when Donald Trump was elected, the only possible explanation was conspiracy theory. And of course, Hillary Clinton purchased what was called the Steele dossier, which is a total fabrication that said that Donald Trump was a Russian agent. And so now the conspiracy theory started to proliferate. So that's a big part of the wobble. When the culture gets wrapped up in these unintended consequences, things seem to be out of control. People are very upset, and Donald Trump, of course, then had his 4-year term, which was mired in all of very, very angry rhetoric from both sides, and it was ugly. There were, in fact, some achievements that I think are notable, but on the whole, it really did not go well, and I think mostly he failed. He would never admit that. And what I mean by fail is on his own terms. If you're asking me, my judgment will be much more harsh. But let's say he had an agenda, and did he accomplish that agenda? No, I don't think he did. And he was checked and checkmated by so many various figures within his own administration, within the deep state. So I don't think he got anywhere near even his own program achieved. And that was a feature of the wobble, that the Trump presidency, more than any other in history, is characterized by, with the possible exception of the John F. Kennedy administration, is an administration that exhibits the phenomenon of divided government. And this is actually a good thing overall. Divided government means checks and balances. It means that no president can be a dictator. But on the other hand, when the president has an agenda that in some regards is positive, and the rest of his administration is at war with him, then of course there is a cost there. There is a sad element to divided government. As per chapter 1, saddest example of divided government failing to do good is the story of the inability of American leaders to get rid of slavery. That was because of divided government. That was because you have state governments, you have the House, you have the Senate, you have the president, you have all of these various institutions which do not work together, and consequently constitutional amendments were not possible to bring an end to slavery, and therefore the Civil War was necessitated. So that's an example of how you have this good thing, but because of contradictions embedded in society, that actually backfires. It actually prevents you from achieving good. In an overall good system, okay, you have to live with those things. Now we're in a system that is profoundly mixed, and so now it's, divided government is still good, especially in the form of the Supreme Court, as a separate branch of the judicial branch, although the rest of the judiciary is extremely dangerous as we stand. Of course, we see this in the phenomenon of the Democrats deploying lawfare, as it's called, to attack Donald Trump in insidious ways, nonsensical ways, and yet they're able to posture as if it makes sense. And so that's an example, again, of, okay, there's a war between different aspects of the government. That's part of the wobble. And then, well, exactly how the 2020 election went, I doubt we will ever know. The system is corrupt. And do I think it's possible that the election was stolen from Donald Trump? Yes, I do. I do think it is literally possible. Do I think it's probable? No, I'm not willing to go that far. But I think it's possible. Literally, as in, rigging the machines, the way the mail-in ballots were done, the way that the trending of the votes in places like Pennsylvania, where you have Donald Trump leading by a substantial margin, and then they stop counting, and then before you know it, they come back the next day and Joe Biden is leading. And there's all kinds of really suspicious things that happened there. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Democrats rigged the election. I have no evidence because we don't live in that kind of culture anymore. We do not live in an honest civilization. I mean, the whole of it, the world civilization is dishonest now. But okay, America, let's focus on America. America is not an honest culture anymore. So, people do things in a politicized way, very biased and very dishonest. So I don't think there's any way to get to the truth of the 2020 election. But that's also part of the wobble. If there's no honesty, then there's no truth. And well, okay, we're done. Honesty is a fundamental rational virtue. So the culture is in big trouble on that front. So Donald Trump now is making his comeback, and he trounced Joe Biden in that weird debate that they had. And of course, it was so bad that literally they tried to kill Donald Trump. And I can say that with confidence that they literally did. And simply because if you observe the subsequent reaction of the Secret Service and of the FBI, they're full of shit, like you've never, ever seen. And yes, the director of the Secret Service resigned, but that's just so she could get out of the limelight. And now, now it's like nothing happened. And it's like, it's unbelievable that you can't get news coverage of this ongoing. And well, why? Well, because then what the Democrats did was they said, okay, we're going to get rid of Joe Biden. I think they actually pushed him out. I think they threatened him with 25th Amendment. I think he didn't want to leave. I think they pushed him out. And then the weirdest thing happened. They said, which I think is in keeping with the culture again, they simply anointed Kamala Harris as the representative. We have that in combination with the fact that RFK Jr. is running breakaway candidacy. This is a lot. This is a mess. This is a lot. This is a plethora. And unfortunately, I think it's designed to be a plethora. In other words, it's designed to be an extremely overwhelming media news stream that who on earth can maintain a well-reasoned, focused narrative of this and parse it and then put it back together and then say, okay, how should I vote? Who on earth can do it? And so, that's where we are. So we're going into the 2024 election as, this course is kicking off, and it's going to be ugly like you've never seen. There is no way that this election will result in an uncontested outcome. No way. I personally, am willing to go out on a limb and say that assuming the election is fair, that Donald Trump will win, that RFK Jr. will place second, and Kamala Harris will place third. I think if it was an honest election, I think that's going to be the result. But some people are talking about the possibility of Kamala Harris winning, and I'm just like, I cannot, for the life of me, reason that out. I don't think so. I think that one of the weird things about the wobble is that we are in what I call end stage social subjectivism. And in subjectivism, subjectivism is largely premised on what Ayn Rand called the primacy of consciousness. And so all of the media outlets have just shifted from Kamala Harris is a moron and an idiot and can never be elected. And that's it. They snapped their fingers and they were, all of a sudden, Kamala Harris is the best ever. And now that's all you'll ever hear. And that's the primacy of consciousness, right? It's like, no, there's no truth. There's no reality. She's not a moron. Objectively, she would not get 3 digits on an IQ score. Okay, but objectively, no, we're not going to forget that. Doesn't matter. That reality, there is no reality. Reality is what we make it, primacy of consciousness. So we are going to say that she is the greatest, and we are going to make her president by doing that. And we're going to make AI-generated images of crowds. We're gonna have rap stars and hip hop stars show up before she has her stuff, so the audiences will be really full of. There'll be a lot of young people there. There'll be a lot of energy, and so we'll pretend like she's popular, and all kinds of really weird things. But even so, I mean, she's already shooting herself in the foot by saying she's going to implement price controls on groceries. There's these things that she can't help her. I swear she can't help herself. And I don't think the Democrats can help themselves. And I don't think, I pray that Americans are not that stupid. But on the other hand, okay, I'm not endorsing Donald Trump when I say that, and I'm not endorsing RFK Jr. when I say that. But one of these two candidates is definitely the lesser evil when it comes to the outcome compared to Kamala Harris. But anyway, my suspicion, my prediction as a historian is that Donald Trump is going to win if it's a free and fair election. I think the momentum is tremendous, and I think his voters are unswayable, whereas the Democrats are fraction. They're broken up into factions, the RFK side and the Kamala Harris side. And a lot of people who are Democrats just will not be able to vote for Kamala Harris. I don't think they can stomach that. And so I really think it's going to be even a landslide. But that remains to be seen. Regardless, the wobble will continue. And it will not be resolved by this election. I don't know when it will be. In other words, if the Democrats win, that doesn't mean we're going to have Democrats from now on in a dynasty. If it did, okay, the wobble would be over. If the Republicans win, Donald Trump wins, that doesn't mean we're going to have a mega dynasty. So I still believe Americans are going to go back and forth. The wobble is just going to keep on, it's going to keep on wobbling for a while. So I don't think we are now where we are yet. We haven't clinched it yet in terms of this election will mean it's done. We're in post-Americanistic culture. It's over. I still think we have at least 4 years to go. But what we will get will be hugely indicative of that which is to come. And it will be which horrible policies are we going to get, the Democrats' horrible policies, or the Republican MAGA horrible policies, and consequently, what will be the exacerbation of the polarization of the social contract, and how will that tilt, and slightly change the trajectory of events without fundamentally altering the outcome, is the only thing that interests me at this point with regard to the current election. Other than, if I was living in the United States, I would literally have 2 weeks worth of groceries ready to go and a gun if I was living in the United States. And I would go early and vote in the morning, and then I would lock myself in my house and I wouldn't go out because things are gonna be ugly. Donald Trump wins, the streets will burn. If he loses, they might also burn. Because MAGA, we saw them very susceptible to demagoguery. We saw them on January 6th storm the Congress. It was nearly as bad as it was pretended to be, but nonetheless, they were dumb enough to do that. And they will be incited to do worse things this time. So either way, if I was in America, I wouldn't go out after the morning of the election. I would sit home and make sure I'm barricaded in there and safe with my family and safe, or even better, go camping somewhere isolated on private property. So I don't know. It's like, this is going to be ugly. I don't think it is yet the trigger for total crackdown and as I predict in this book, the onset of full-on fascism. But that's coming. It's just a matter of time. So it's not fun to make predictions of that sort, of course, but I see no other possible outcome. I think I'm certain that is what is to come. There's no scenario I can imagine in which that will not happen. So it is what it is. So let's now talk about, that's kind of pretty long-winded lead up into this particular session here. With regard to, the history of the history of tomorrow as a sequel to the history of now, what you read in the note to the reader and the introduction is that hierarchy is very important, right? That this is not, history is not flat. We got the flat earthers and we got the flat history historians. I don't know, maybe that doesn't come off right. The flat history or historians. Everybody thinks history is flat. What I mean by that is that people believe that what you do when it comes to history is no matter what topic you're interested in, you just go pick up the book. It doesn't matter if it's China, if it's India, if it's ancient Mesopotamia, if it's the history of Latin America, whatever period, whatever place, doesn't matter. If you want to study the history, all you do is read the book. Go find a history of that topic. And so what that means is the premise there, unstated in the minds of everybody, but nonetheless implicit, is that history is flat. In order to, there's no on-ramp. There's no structure, there's no hierarchy. In order to enter into history, all you got to do is open the book. And then when you open that book, and immediately you are immersed in the story of the past. And that there, of course, is the flaw. The story of the past is not what history is supposed to be. That is an imposter. History is supposed to be the revelation and explanation of the world we live in. And it's only in that context that history exhibits hierarchy. So that's, I mean, it's really super fundamental. It's modal in the sense that as a fundamental epistemological posture, it's even metaphysical, because it, of course, is when it comes to epistemology and metaphysics, they always combine. What we're saying is the only thing worthy of attention, of consciousness, is existence. Yeah, but the past doesn't exist anymore. It existed. What exists is the world we live in. That's the only thing fundamentally worthy of attention. The past, as a causal background to how we got here, is worth knowing to a conceptual consciousness, because we have the ability to see and reason about how we got here. But that's because of this incredible nature that we possess, the rational faculty that we possess. But that's only an extension of our consciousness. And so it's not a fundamental, the past is not an object worthy of study in and of itself. It does not exist any longer. It cannot legitimately be an object of study. It doesn't exist anymore. It can be a legitimate object of study in connection to, in relation to the world we live in. That's where the objectivity, legitimacy, and relevance comes from. And so in order for it to do that, though, of course, we've got this giant galaxy of facts. This impossibly large universe of facts. Again, it's all about hierarchy. If we don't know how to approach that, we're cooked. Like, there's no way to do it. There is no way. You can't randomly do it. And you most certainly cannot, sorry, Leonard Peacock, you can't start at the beginning. That's useless. You have to start at the end. This is history. It's not fiction. In fiction, you don't want to read the conclusion before you read the, you don't want to read about John Galt and Dagny in the Gulch at the end and the dollar sign and stuff. Like, you know what the whole friggin' thing's going to add up to. No. But in fiction, you absolutely, in nonfiction, in history, you absolutely must know the end before you start. And so, because this is cognition, it's not storytelling for inspiration. This is cognition, and cognition is serious business. So the flat historyers don't take, revealingly enough, right? The flat historyers don't take history serious. Nobody that believes in flat history cares. Not really. They might have arguments on Facebook, but they don't really care. It has nothing to do with how they live. It doesn't really matter. It's fake. Flat history is just a joke. It's totally fallacious. So we can't go there. And so the beginning of the history of tomorrow is a summons to you as the reader. It says, I know that all you have known is flat history. You have not sailed the earth. I know that. You don't know that it's round. You don't know that history is a multidimensional, vast constellation. You think it's flat because everything you've ever encountered is flat. So how could you possibly know that it's not flat? Right? And so if you read the history of now, I didn't tell you, right? But what I was doing in the history of now was showing you it's not flat. Showing you that it's textured and showing you all kinds of things about it. But I wasn't explicit about that fact. You know, you don't see me discussing hierarchy explicitly in the history of now. I only do, but I need to do it now because in the history of tomorrow, because this cannot remain unsaid. There's no way this narrative can be given without explaining why it's given the way that it is. And the reason why it's given the way that it is that literally at every step, there's a context that allows us to engage in a new form of cognition, in a new situation that require new knowledge that will then set the context for the next chapter, which allows us to continue to build and build and build. And at the end, when you've done it fully, which for any reader, even me as the writer, is pure torture, super hard work, and will take a long time, many years, literally many years for any reader to get this for good. I've read Introduction to Epistemology at least 10 times. And really it only started sinking in like the 5th or 6th or 7th read. And I knew that, and I was honest with myself about that, you know, but basically that's the way it's gonna be for any reader when it comes to the history of tomorrow as well, is it's gonna take you years to assimilate this. And you've got yours, so hopefully, you know, it will fuel your understanding. You'll see the connections to events that are unfolding around you. You'll want to circle back. You'll be able to go through the book. You can read a summary and integration section every once in a while with the coffee for breakfast. You don't have to read the whole chapter, right? That's why I provide those sections. And you can re-summon that context, and deploy it again, and think about it some more, and just keep going. Because there's no other way. There's no other way. None of this stuff is automatic or easy. None of this stuff is going to sink in on the first read. It's because there's a tremendous structure and hierarchy involved, and you absolutely must respect that. And even when you do, still not going to click effortlessly. It's not. The reason for that is, I invite you to screen capture this particular one if you like. This is discussed in detail in chapter 5. So, but it's good for you to have. This is a table of the hierarchy of constructs in the history of now. And since it's a hierarchical table, you work your way from the bottom up, right? And maybe I should have made it kind of like a pyramid shape or whatever to make it a little bit more obvious in that way. But basically, you're working your way from the bottom level up to the top. Each one of these is literally a hierarchical necessity that if you fail to achieve the right level of awareness pertaining to any particular level, the next level will be weakened, if not impeded, to the point of non-viability. So it's pretty, you know, serious business, right? So you, in order to, you know, get to the world we live in, which in many regards is the most fundamental construct of any present-centric history, you do need some groundwork. There's nothing obvious about it. You need to know cardinal cultures are. In order to know that, you need to know, that's a hierarchy. In order to know, you need to know this, what a cultural block is. In order to know what a cultural block is, you could argue, in order to know what a cultural block is, you need to know what a country is. But the reason why I put those side by side is that countries are constructs. And some of the cardinal cultures are countries, and some of them are cultural blocks. So therefore, I've got them at the same level. Hierarchy is a tricky thing. Hierarchy is not pyramid building. Well, I mean, it's not a bad metaphor in the sense that, you know, when you got a pyramid, usually underneath any particular block, you're probably resting on 4 other blocks or more, right? The way the pyramids get built, if you think about the 3-dimensional geography. So I can't do 3D here, but you know, that idea applies. But on the other hand, it's also, blocks aren't just squares, right? They're not just squares, they're not rectangles, they're mental blocks or fascinating amorphous octopus-like structures. So hierarchy is not a simple thing. So when we oversimplify it like this, we're losing some of the beauty of it, but nonetheless, there it is, right? So let's go through a few of these from the ground up. And this is interesting because you would think, now actually let's work in the middle and then let's reduce, right? So sometimes that's okay. Right? The world we live in. Off the top of your head, what is it?
The world we live in, an interconnected agglomeration of. I should get Addie to do this. She can do it better than me.
Right.
An interconnected agglomeration of nearly 200 countries organized into 10 major cultural blocks and outliers. Predominated by 5 major cardinal cultures in which the United States has primacy.
Okay, very good. Now, that is the construct that I insist my students work with. As you saw in the history of now, I actually removed one of the layers, right? I removed the layer about the 10 major cultures because I only focused on the 5 cardinal ones. So basically what I said is there's cardinal 5, that's what this history is about. The other ones can be omitted for now. So I omitted that, and that is omittable, but of course, you know it, so good for you, right? So the ability to summon that definition is personal standard of objectivity, test number 1. If that does not come relatively unbidden, there's a little effort there, but you know, not too much. It came pretty smoothly, right? If that doesn't come out easily, then you're in trouble. Okay, so that's the place to start, right there. No better place to start than that. Now, if you're gonna, of course, when you have an abstraction that has priors, then you need to do reduction, right? In other words, you need to look at the constituents of that. In this case, it's not a definition because it's not a concept, but I refer to it as a formal construct statement. So if you have a formal construct statement, which is composed of other abstractions, then you need to perform reduction in the same way that you need to with a definition. And so the world we live in is an interconnected agglomeration of nearly 200 countries. Oh yeah, what are countries? Predominated by 5 cardinal cultures. Oh yeah, what are cardinal cultures? In which the United States has primacy. That one's pretty easy. Okay, but notice that it's going to sound weird to say, right? But how many people can define what a country is? I mean, really define it properly. It's a country. No, okay, so the walking, talking definition would be what? This is a place in the world where people live and they have a government. Okay, all right, so that's okay. That's actually all right. Something to that effect. Right? Interesting thing about a country is because of this weird conjunction of this, it's a very abstract idea. Of course, you can't see a country. There's no way that you could ever perceive a country. Doesn't matter if you're standing at the border. You can perceive the fence. You can see and grasp that there are border guards, or not, as the case may be. But you know, and when you're in a country, you can perceive the people and what language they talk, and whether they drive on the right hand side or the left, etc. Right? Okay, you can see all those things, but you can never possibly take those things and collect those as a perceptual referent and get the word country. You really have to think it through. You really have to be able to look at a map, and you really have to understand geography, so to have geography as a component. And you've got to be able to differentiate between countries and states and other types of communities. And there's a lot of work there. Okay, but let's assume that the walking, talking definition of country is enough. Place in the world, people live in an organized way with a government. Good enough, good enough. If you want my official definition, country is a geopolitical construct involving the settlement of a population in a delimited geographical area, which is ordered and protected by a government that is recognized by other governments. That's actually an extended feature. Can't have a country unless it's recognized by other countries. Mutual referential kind of feature of what countries are. I mean, presumably, if there was only one country in the world, then you could have it without being recognized by another one. But of course, that's not the context of reality. So in our context, you don't have a country unless you're recognized, right? So good examples of countries that aren't countries would be the countries that aren't countries because they aren't recognized. I mean, the perfect one is Taiwan. Taiwan is a country, but it's not a country. Second is, the more absurd example of the Palestinian state. It's not a country. What are some others? There aren't any really super prominent ones.
Maybe Hong Kong.
Yeah, Hong Kong's in China now. It's done.
Okay.
Yeah, they're done. So yeah, they used to be. Yeah, I mean, city-states are an interesting problem. Like, is Vatican City really a country? So there are a few that are a little bit quirky, right? But in terms of recognition, Taiwan and the Palestinian state have the most issues in that particular regard. I can't immediately think of too many others. There are disputed borders all over the world, but that's about it for now. So that is a part of the proper definition. But let's go back to the slide about hierarchy here. What are cultural blocks? Because look, if you really want to have a strong, we've all been through this. When you can state the definition of something, you're in good shape. You're in better shape that you can't. You're in better shape than you would be if you could not state the definition, right? The concept is the mental integration of two or more units possessing the same distinguishing characteristics with their particular measurements omitted. I know that one. Right? If you can't rifle that one off, you don't know what a concept is. On the other hand, if that's all you can do, then you don't know what a concept is either, right? You got a lot of reduction and concretization, and wow, you got work to do. Integration, reduction, concretization, in order to know really what is a concept. Including, one of the reasons why people don't understand concepts very well is because they don't know what constructs are. There's two different types of abstractions. Very interesting. Anyway, being the originator of the theory of constructs gives me a unique perspective on that. Now, so if you can rifle off the definition of the world we live in, you're in good shape, right? But if you can't reduce and concretize, then not so good, right? So for instance, what are the 5 cardinal cultures? Boom, that's got to come, right? If you said it's predominated by 5 cardinal cultures, okay, go. What are they?
The United States, China, Russia, the EU, and the Islamic world.
Yeah. Okay, so you have to think about that last one for a while, and that's okay. Because the truth is, the Islamic world is supine, it is a mess, it is disintegrated. Okay, the only reason why it qualifies as a cardinal culture is because of the presence of Islamism. So if that were not there, Islamic culture would not be an important culture. Well, it sure is. It sure is. Just ask the people of Britain. All right. So, you got to know the five, right? That's not the same thing as concretization. In construct formation, you don't concretize, you specify. It's a little bit of a different act, but similar to. Got to specify the constituents of the construct. They're not units, they are elements of a different sort. So yeah, you got to be able to say those five. And you got to be able to say what a cultural block is if you really want to knock it out of the park. What is a cultural block?
Okay, so I don't think I have a memorized statement for this one, but a cultural bloc is a group of countries that share a culture and exert their impulse on history or on the world together instead of alone.
Not bad, not bad. So that's definitely a good informal statement. It means you know it. If you spent time sharpening it on your own, you would be there, right? So you're very close. You're very close. So now, what I do is, I take countries and I say, okay, cultural blocks are either countries or group of countries. So that way, basically, countries become an example. The United States is a country, but I also treat it as a cultural block in and of itself. So some countries like China, India, the United States, and Russia are cultural blocks in and of themselves. Others require grouping. Why? You said it, okay? Because, but I'm going to now be more precise. A cultural block is a country or group of countries that imparts a cognitively significant impulse to history at any particular time. So see, what is the key to the definition? Key is that the thrust that the block gives is cognitively significant. It is worthy of attention for the purpose of cognition. This is huge. Imagine if we lived in a culture that was ready to hear something like this. Do you want to know why history is so freaking boring all the time? Why is history so freaking boring all the time?
No cognitive value significance.
Exactly correct. Which is funny because Canadian history is super boring, right? Why is Canadian history so boring? Because it doesn't have any cognitive value. But now, of course, it's a little bit more relevant to Canadians. But it's not an important topic in history. Because history's purpose is not to reveal and explain how Canada got here. What is history's purpose?
To reveal and explain the world we live in.
How the world got there. How big of a deal is Canada in this world? Sorry to tell you, no. Completely disposable. If Canada were gone tomorrow, yes, there would be some oil missing and so on. The rest of the world wouldn't really notice, as astounding as that statement is. But that's true of at least 150 of the countries of the world as countries. Right? If Uruguay disappeared tomorrow, anybody going to notice? So you're saying, no, of course I would notice because I'm living in Canada. Okay, but would anybody in Uruguay notice if Canada disappeared? No. Vice versa. Would anybody in Canada notice if Uruguay disappeared tomorrow? No. Not really. Of course, you have relatives in Uruguay. Fine, right? Somebody's always coming up with a counter argument. But would you notice, right, if Angola disappeared tomorrow? No, you wouldn't. Would you notice if Cambodia disappeared tomorrow? No, you wouldn't. Literally disappeared off, wiped off the face of the map, you wouldn't even notice. Your whole life, you would, if somebody told you, hey, did you know that 10 years ago, a meteor hit Cambodia and everybody there died? And you'd be like, what? No, I didn't notice. If it wasn't on the news, right? But, okay, if the United States disappeared tomorrow, Armageddon, right?
Yeah.
Armageddon.
Mhm.
China invades Taiwan immediately. Israel and Iran are at war. Israel probably, there was actually a fiction novel that had this storyline. There was a mysterious event. I don't think anybody was able to explain it. Like, you know, the author just came up with a sci-fi mysterious event. The United States, like 90% of the United States disappeared, like it was an EMP or something like that. There was Hawaii and Seattle and Maine. But basically, if you draw a circle around the middle of the US, like everything in the circle wiped out. And at that point, the first thing that happens, and which I think is correct, the first thing that happens after that in the novel is that Israel launches a preemptive nuclear strike on the entire Islamic world. And I think the author is exactly right. The Israelis would wake up and they would say, okay, launch. And that would be it. It would be devastating. The entire Islamic world would be wiped out. And then, of course, what else would happen? You know, what other horrible things? But basically, the United States is the world police power, and it imposes a metastatic order, meaning it's fake stability. If the US were gone, it wouldn't be stable. It would be profoundly unstable. So, yeah, I mean, wow, right? So you take away at least 150 of any of the individual countries on this earth, nobody else notices. You take away the United States, the whole world falls apart. Think about what it would be like if you take away the European Union. What a devastation that would be. You take away Russia, what an enormous impact that would have on the world. You take away China, wow, economic collapse of the world in an instant. You take away the Islamic world, maybe I shouldn't announce it out loud, right? Because then this video will not be allowed on YouTube. So, you know, you take away these things, everything changes, like everything. The entire world changes, right? So, cultural blocks. But cardinal is another concept. So again, Heather, you can ask Addie what cardinal means if you need to brush up on that one.
Well, cardinal means, and again, I must have learned it from her classes because I've got it in childish words in my head, but it's basically that the cardinal cultures are the ones that are trying to change the world, trying to make the world more like
Okay,
themselves.
but everybody's trying to change the world, but they're the ones that
Actually,
can.
right.
Yeah, they have the will and the means. To be cardinal, you got to have both. And another great thing to do with the concept cardinal is to recall the Latin root word cardo. Cardo is a hinge. So when you think of it in those terms, cardinal culture is a culture upon which history hinges. So you can think of history as a door. The thing is moving, and that's the hinge. That dictates how the door moves. You can't move a door other than by pushing it in the right place and rotating it on the hinge. That's the only way it moves. So those are cardinal cultures, the ones upon which history hinges. So structurally, those layers are there, they got to be in place. And then, last thing for today, cardinal anchor fact framework, next level up. Once you know 5 cardinal cultures predominate this world, they are the United States, China, Russia, the European Union, the Islamic world. Okay, once that is embedded in your subconscious, then you're ready to easily summon the cardinal anchor fact framework of the world, right? And work on that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to leave that to you as a homework assignment. I want to remind you that the cardinal anchor fact framework is a big deal. It is the only visualization of world history that is possible and only condensed, essentialized visualization of world history that is possible. It literally allows you to grasp the shape of history, which is an astounding possibility, which is a tribute to our consciousness and its ability to integrate and condense. When you have the cardinal link infract framework, the entire shape of history is at your disposal. And even if what you're trying to think about is something that does not pertain to the 5 cardinal cultures, you can easily put it in its proper place and think about how it relates to the cardinal roots. There's, of course, another layer to it, but that other layer is another layer, hierarchically speaking. To be able to model all 10 of the major cultures is quite a complex feat. The first group of students that ever is going to be asked to do that is going to be the students that are enrolled in the Advanced History program of Knowable World. They will be the first, they will be the vanguard, epistemological vanguard of humanity. And so I'm going to work with them on achieving that goal. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it in 1 year, but I got some smart kids and they already know a lot. So maybe we can do it. And that is it, but that's another level. So for now, your job for homework is dominate this thing. Make it so you can see it in your sleep. Not a lot. And I can't tell you how many times I've drawn this. If you want to know what it takes, obviously, I'm the only one here that's a historian by trade, right? So, okay, not everybody needs to know. Okay, right. Well, still, if you're here, it's because you have a way above average IQ, intellect, ambition, and level of interest here. So let's do this. Let's do this. You can do it. You can handle this. And so you've got to be able to diagram this. I recommend this diagram with breakfast every day for a while, unless, of course, you've already got it. Unless you already have dominated. If you haven't dominated it, I recommend this diagram with breakfast every day. That's what I did. I mean, there were days when I drew this 10 times. So you don't have to do that. But if you do it once a day, it'll get really fast and really comfortable, like riding a bike, right? And so you can, this is doable. And there's more to do, right? So, once you've done this, then we got to do this. Then we got to put these in there, and then we got to do this. We got some work to do, and there is a point at which I am certain, of course, I know there's a point at which this kind of work ceases to be motivating. And where for each and every one of you individually, as a student here in this course, there will be a limit. I'm okay with that. This can't be it, though. Okay, there's a limit, but you're not allowed to. This is not it. so you're not allowed to settle for this. But there's a limit somewhere, somewhere between this and this. I mean, if you're going to go for this, great. Okay, there's a limit somewhere between this, and this. You're allowed to say to me, look, Scott, I am never going to memorize that. And I'll be like, fine, don't worry about it. Like, okay, I don't care when the Crusades were, or I don't care what the exact dates of the Reformation and religious wars are. Okay, I'm all right with that. But, tell you what, over time, those things will come. It will sink in as well. So for now, let's drill this. And so if you can rifle this off for me as again, next personal standard of objectivity, then you're in a good position to understand why the history of tomorrow unfolds as it does. This sets the context. It is absolutely necessary in order to understand everything that's in this book. So let's end on that note. Questions, of course. Questions and comments, of course. Or not. That's okay.
How long ago did you start thinking about present centric as a concept?
Like I said, I was in Brazil.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah,
so
right.
we were living in Brazil in, yeah, wow. My memory for it's hilarious. I'm a historian. I don't remember dates. So when were we in Brazil? It was 20.
15 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was something like that. I really would have
Yeah, that's
to
okay.
think you're here and then here and this.
Yes, you've been
Yeah,
all over the globe.
so many places.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yeah.
It was actually the second time we were in Brazil,
Uh-huh.
and it was, it was in between two different episodes of Living in Houston. So it's all a little bit
Right.
in my mind. It's timeline.
Well, and I know from traveling a lot myself is that actually traveling to places that are different really just not distorts, but changes your sense of time. Because I think my small theory on that is that I think that some of how we perceive our own sense of time is based on how much new information comes at us. Because I always found when I was in a different culture that was very unusual to me, the time was really extended for the first week or so until I became a bit more acclimatized to say, India. And then as I got more acclimatized, the time started to get more normalized for me. So I started to think that perhaps it was based on how many new experiences externally we have that is part of how we judge time. In any case, I did find that my sense of time was definitely changed by moving around like that. So I'm sure, and you've done a lot of moving around.
So much.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's been something like, I think 15 years is a pretty good guess.
Mhm.
Less than that. I'm sure Sharon's way better at that than I am.
Mhm.
But anyway,
Mhm.
it was the first time was in Brazil and something like 15 years ago. So yeah, and it was just, that word just came to me. And it's, as you can see it, remember it's in the very second page of the history of now. Okay, I'm going to coin a term. I'm going to call this present century.
May I
So,
ask
yeah.
as well, how were you thinking about history prior to that?
I was just trying to put it together and I wasn't, so I had figured out that there's such a thing as periodization, and that was really
Yes.
interesting.
Mhm.
But truth is, I was very disappointed in what my students were getting from me. And every creator will tell you the same thing. They're harder on themselves than anybody else is, right? So
Mhm.
I'm just super hard on myself. Sharon, will tell you that. And so when I was thinking about how well am I teaching my kids and what are they getting out of it and what are the real world outcomes of their knowledge,
Mhm.
and I came to the realization that sadly they're not really getting anything. It really forced me to tackle this. Say,
Mhm.
why is history so useless?
Mhm.
And I realized, it doesn't have to be.
Mhm.
And now I know it is, but it's just, wow.
Yes. Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Heather, anything else?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to run one thing by you real quick. Maybe we can talk about this another time, but I'm just looking at this hierarchy of constructs chart that you shared earlier. Yeah. And this is the first time I've seen this, and it's really interesting. And I'm thinking, of course, about Noble World and the little kids, the history detectives, because we're looking at the second level of that and we're just starting. So in the beginning, it was just like the world's made up of countries. This is new information. And I can see how it's starting at that, really low or level on this chart. And then sort of the whole History Detectives program culminates in the world we live in, right? So they're kind of climbing up this chart a little bit. And then I know that, and then you said that the advanced history program, they're going to leave with this whole thing, really, right? They're going to be able to do the fundamental periodization diagram. And so just for my own information here, like, are the kids in the 3 to regular 12, before the advanced history, are they doing the periodizations, or are they more just getting to the anchor fact narratives? Are they?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. So they are, but not explicitly. So, if you look at what the kids do in terms of their timelines, you will see anchor facts, and you will sometimes see, as I consider to be appropriate, periodizations to group those facts. But yeah, it's not something that I have been able to establish a clear progression of learning, in the child's context for yet. So I've experimented in different ways with periodization and having the diagrams be structured in different ways. Unfortunately, this is a limitation that I'm working with. If we wanted to get to fundamental periodizations, second from the top, actually, no. If we wanted to get to the between the second top and the third top, all the students would have to write paragraph narratives for every period that we study. I can't make them do that. That's asking too much. So I have run, the writing seminars previously, but I don't have time for them. So ideally, there would be writing seminars.
I can see how they're starting to be introduced to the idea of periodizations. Like, for example, in the technology section where you've got the pre-initial.
Yes, exactly. They're also being introduced to periodizations when I tell them, China is post-Maoist, and what is that? Right?
Yes.
And we talk about China being the Middle Kingdom. So they're getting spoon-fed some periodization.
Right, yeah, that next step. Okay, that I really like that that way of breaking it down. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. That's really cool, and so much yet to be, really systematized in that regard. Because when it is, then the curriculum will be just out of this world good. Right? For that, now I'm still groping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another
Good.
big challenge.
Well. All right. It was awesome. Thank you for being here for the first session. We're going to have to jolt VJ awake and see if we can get some other folks to get here too. And keep going.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Thanks,
You
Scott.
got it. See you soon.
See you.